the Quran in Surah Al-Jinn makes reference. Now, it's a beautiful surah, it's a short surah. If you get the time to read the tafsir of that surah, 72nd surah, please read it. There's a lot more information inside there about those jinns. Now, having those two different jinns, the good ones and the evil ones, you now can understand that in their world you've got everything that we have, they have. They came once to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam in his time, and Abdullah bin Masud radiallahu anhu was with him. Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam was in an open field, open sort of space, and he said, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he drew a circle on the ground, and he said, oh Abdullah, he said, sit inside the circle, don't come out of the circle until I return back. And Abdullah bin Masud in his hadith of Tirmidhi, he says that I saw in the distance, he said, long, tall, large creatures, that are see-through. They came down from the skies down to the earth. And Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was in the distance. He spent a long time there. Then he came back to me and he said that these were jinns that had come to me, and they have given me a kind of a complaint. They said that they want me to tell my ummah, my community of human beings, not to use bones. Now, what happened in those days, that they used to go out in the wild to relieve themselves, and sometimes they would find, they couldn't find a smooth stone or something, or rock or whatever, to clean themselves, so they would find a bone or something, and they would just use that smooth bone. They would use that to sort of cleanse themselves. Now the jinns complained to the Prophet ﷺ. They said, tell your ummah not to do this, because Allah puts rizq and our provision on these bones, and we eat after the human beings have finished with these bones. So sometimes you see, you've left a bag out there, and you see a cat every single night. The same cat comes, and snarls and snarls wherever, and comes and eats from this little place wherever you put the bones, and just bites some bones. That is probably 99% a jinn. So be careful when you shoo it away, be careful. You might want to just give it another bone, empty bone, and say, go my little jinn friend, have that one as well, right? But don't sort of, beat away whatever, animal you see coming to some, specifically when they have bones, specifically when they're after bones. That is one of the signs that we know from the hadith, that it could be a jinn that has come in the shape of a cat. Now they take forms. Now, not all jinns can do this. Some jinns can do this. They can change into a snake. They can change into a cat. They can change into a dog. They can change, and that's why one of the reasons we know this is that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, when he came into Medina, he gave specific orders to kill black dogs. He gave orders to kill, dogs in general. He said, just get rid of some of these. And then when they lessened, he said, leave dogs alone. He said, Allah has created them just as He's created other creatures of His. They are a creation of God. Now leave them. He said, except for the black one. That's a shaitan. He has mentioned to the extent of this. So again, they can change into. No, we're not saying every single black dog is a shaitan. Okay, this is just we don't generalize like that. It means that some black dogs can actually be shayateen. You've got to understand the nature of a hadith. When a hadith is said, sometimes when the Quran is speaking, they're not talking about every single part of the population. This is a big mistake people make. When the Quran says innal yahud, when it says Jews, it doesn't mean every single Jews. The alif lam in al-Yahud or al-Nasara, it's talking about specific Jewish people, specific Christians. Just like sometimes when Allah says Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu, He's not talking always to every single believer. He's talking to specific believers. That might have been in the Prophet ﷺ's time. Anyway, so we know that they have rizq from these. Now, their living places, generally they live where there's water, where there's caves, where there's inhabited places, there's trees. And so not every tree will have one, okay? So don't get hyped up about trees. I remember once I said some jinn stories, and there was a person who just not go near trees, right? So we don't want to cause that kind of sort of obsession or something. Now, they reside in places. Now, when they come in contact with the human beings, why is it then that sometimes they would want to influence a human being? Now, before I get into this, one important thing that I need to mention is some people just don't believe in this. Some people don't believe that a jinn can actually have an effect on a human being to the extent that they can take over their senses, They can take over the way they think. Some people don't believe that. Now, if you don't believe in it, I don't blame you, because you haven't seen it. You haven't been there. You need to be in the presence of these cases when these things happen. And all I will say to you is that if you can find someone who does exorcism, you just need to spend a few days with them, and then you will basically start seeing some of these things. And when you see quite a few cases, you then begin to start thinking, well, this is not something which is natural, normal. They can come in, yes, and they can break that barrier. As I said, they can break that barrier, come into a human being and take over sort of the mind. They may sometimes take over the mind, sometimes they might not. Sometimes what happens is jinns may follow a person because they just like the person. Sometimes they follow a person, they like the person, and they like to do good things for that person. There's cases like that. I know a person who said to me that whenever it's Fajr time, they get woken up for Fajr by something. Yep, it happens. There's a person that regularly, whenever they're not waking for Fajr, there might be a jinn that might actually wake them up for Fajr, which is, alhamdulillah, a good thing. Sometimes, there's a good sort of jinn in the house. They'll just stay there peacefully all their life, all your life. They won't bother you. And it's a good thing to have that good jinn in your house, because if it's a mu'min, if it's a believer, then you've got some good actions that are being done. Sometimes you're praying jama'ah in your place, or sometimes you're praying in your house, and they will come and sit next to you. These are good jinns. They will do that, and you don't need to be worried about that fact, because it's a good thing. In this masjid, every single masjid, there are many jinns that are coming every time they're praying with us. There's they will join with us in the safs. Sometimes when they can't join in, they might just join on our shoulders. They can stand on our shoulders, something, they can join with us. They can sort of do sujood on our backs, they can do sujood behind us, whatever, behind the sufuf, whatever, they can join us basically.